On a Saturday night in the fall of 1969, the warmth of San Francisco's glowing neon nightlife stood in sharp contrast to the cold fog rolling in off the bay. The city was loud, vibrant, and alive. Navigating those streets was a 29-year-old graduate student named Paul Stine. His friends at San Francisco State University knew him as a quiet, gentle guy, someone who would much rather sit and debate English literature than find himself in an argument. Paul took weekend shifts behind the wheel of yellow cab number 912 to pay his way through university, putting his earnings directly toward his tuition and his goal of becoming a writer. When he started his shift on the night of October 11th, Paul was entirely focused on earning those fares. He had no way of knowing that a serial killer who had already murdered at least 5 people across California was actively hunting in the city. Sometime around 9:45 p.m., Paul pulled his cab over in the busy downtown Union Square area. A single male passenger opened the door and climbed into the back seat. It was a completely ordinary transaction, a simple decision to pick up one last fare for the night to pay for school. But the moment those doors closed, Paul Stine had unknowingly invited his own murder into the car. This map shows the exact route requested, a short drive to Washington and Maple in Presidio Heights, exactly 6 blocks. The killer sat silently. When the cab pulled to the curb, it skipped the requested intersection, rolling 1 block further to Washington and Cherry. Across the street, a group of teenagers happened to be looking out their upstairs window. They watched a physical struggle break out in the front seat of the parked cab. The witnesses then watched the passengers step out of the car. He didn't run. Instead, he calmly and methodically began wiping down the interior of the cab to erase his fingerprints. The teenagers called the police, but a disastrous error occurred at the station. The dispatcher radioed units to search for a black male suspect. The man who had just shot Paul Stine was white. Minutes later, responding officers arrived at the perimeter. Driving past the scene, they spotted a heavy-set white man walking casually north along the park wall. Working off the flawed dispatch, the officers slowed their cruiser down and rolled down the window. They asked the man if he had seen anything suspicious. He calmly said yes and pointed the officers further down the road, deeper into the Presidio. 2 armed police officers looked the Zodiac killer directly in the eye. They spoke to him, and because of a single miscommunication over a dispatch radio, they thanked him for his help and watched him disappear into the fog. The killer wasted no time weaponizing his escape. Within days, a thick envelope arrived at the offices of the San Francisco Chronicle. In the enclosed letter, the Zodiac explicitly claimed responsibility for murdering the cab driver. To prove he was the one in the back seat, he included a physical trophy inside the envelope. It was a torn, heavily blood-stained piece of Paul Stine's shirt. In the text of the letter, the Zodiac gleefully mocked the police for stopping him and letting him go. He then declared that his next target would be a school bus full of children. The threat paralyzed San Francisco. Parents kept their kids at home, and armed police officers were forced to trail buses across the city. That letter triggered one of the most intensive manhunts in California history. But thousands of dead-end tips, multiple suspect interrogations, and mountains of encrypted ciphers failed to produce an arrest, leaving the case officially unsolved 5 decades later. The public obsession with the killer's identity often obscures the actual life of Paul Stine, a graduate student whose academic goals and quiet potential were ended by a 6-block drive. The terror of the Zodiac case remains rooted in how easily the killer blended into the city. He was a passenger who sat quietly in a cab, spoke politely to police, and then stepped into the dark without ever being found.